comrades. Welcome to the first installment of the headlines, where I get a local newspaper and I read it to you and give you my reaction. Today's newspaper is the Plain Dealer. It is the de facto newspaper of the Plain. It's the Plain Dealer's de facto newspaper of Cleveland, Ohio. In the headlines, it is Election 2020. Former primary foe gets Biden's nod in reference to the Kamala Harris vice president selection. The caption for the picture, which has Kamala Harris, reads, Senator Kamala Harris is the daughter of immigrants from India and Jamaica. She ran in the Democratic Party presidential primary as a top cop, in quotes. As a general attorney of California, she worked closely with Joe Biden's son. And then let's get into the actual interview, take out the other sections we don't care about. Joe Biden has answered one of the most highly anticipated questions of his campaign, naming California Senator Kamala Harris, the one-time rival who took him to task for his decades-old view on busing, to be his running mate. She will be the first black woman and first Asian American to run for vice president. She is representing a historic choice at the moment when the country is grappling with its past and future. The Democrats will make remarks today. Learn about Harris and why she was selected for the Biden ticket on page A4, which we will go to. Headline, continued, Biden makes history with his choice. Caption, Senator Kamala Harris campaigns for president a year ago in Davenport, Iowa. Harris and Joe Biden have known each other for several years, and Harris has worked closely with Joe Biden's son, Beau, who served as attorneys general. Caption, subtitle, Senator from California becomes first black woman and South Asian to run for major party ticket, by Kathleen Royan and Will Weishart from the Associated Press. Joe Biden named California Senator Kamala Harris as the running mate on Tuesday, making history by selecting the first black woman to compete in a major party's presidential ticket and acknowledging the vital role black voters will play in this bid to defeat Donald Trump. I have great honor to announce that I have picked Kamala Harris, a fearless fighter for the little guy, one of the country's finest public servants, as my running mate, Biden tweeted. In a text message to his supporters, Biden said, quote, together with you, we're going to beat Trump, unquote. Harris and Biden have planned to deliver remarks Wednesday in Wilmington. In choosing Harris, Biden is embracing the former rival from the Democratic Party who is familiar with the unique rigor of national campaign. Harris, a 55-year-old first-term senator, is also one of the party's most prominent figures and quickly became a top contender for the number 2 spot after her own White House campaign ended. So basically what I'm getting from this is, the Democrats know that they don't really have the full support of the African-American vote, and they're trying to do that with a person of color. After all, they weren't able to get in a white neoconservative, so now they're getting a person of color neoconservative to run and try to win the race with Kamala Harris, not up front, but in second in terms of the Democratic Party. Also, it should be noted that her crime record is, her tough on crime record and what it's meant, her alternative therapies, and how, I guess you could say, backwards they are, almost turning people with it into a cult-like mentality, bringing up their past traumas and up to the forefront, which only helps harm them. Subtitle, a centrist record, which is kind of funny. We all know that she is a neoconservative. Harris, who is also a Indian American, joins Biden in the 2020 race at the moment of unprecedented national crisis. Disruptions resulting from the pandemic have caused an economic collapse. Unrest, meanwhile, has emerged across the country as Americans protest racism and police brutality. Trump's uneven handling of the crisis has given Biden an opening, and he enters the fall campaign in a strong position against the president. In adding Harris to the ticket, we can point her relatively to the centrist record on issues such as healthcare and her background in law enforcement in the nation's largest state. Harris, recorded as a California Attorney General and District Attorney in San Francisco, was heavily scrutinized during a Democratic primary and turned off some liberals and younger black voters who saw her as out of step on issues on systematic racism in the legal system and police brutality. She tried to strike a balance on these issues, declaring herself a top cop and progressive prosecutor who backs reforms. Kamala launched her presidential campaign in early 2019 with the slogan, Kamala Harris, for the people, a reference to her courtroom work. She was one of the highest profile contenders in the crowd in the Democratic Party and attracted 20,000 people to her campaign rally in Oakland. One of Harris's standout moments of her presidential campaign came at the expense of Biden. During her campaign, Harris took Biden to ask for his opposition on mandatory busing. Biden's wife, Jill, has described that moment as being like a punch to the gut. Since then, the two have made up. The early promise of Harris' campaign eventually faded, facing fundraising problems. Harris abruptly withdrew from the race in 2019, 2 months before the first votes of the primary were cast. And I think that that one part about busing is just kind of going to disappear from at least the liberal side of media, your CNN and your MSNBC and whatnot. And of course, in the event of a Biden Harris administration, that we are going to see a lot of that coming from Fox News and such. I'm very doubtful of Trump actually winning this campaign. His original support was frackers and the alt-right, but he has completely eroded that support with such things as his bump stock ban and getting oil and gas and natural resources from the Saudis, effectively alienating the frackers. Whereas Biden and his team have a very solid support from technocrats like Bill Gates and other capitalists like Jeff Bezos, I believe, and most Silicon Valley. I do believe that a Biden victory is in the works, but that is to be seen this November. Another headline continuing it. Trump calls her nasty. As U.S. Senator, Harris quickly gained the attention of her assertive questioning of the Trump administration officials during the congressional hearings. Asked about Biden's announcement, President Donald Trump said he surprised Biden chose her. Trump said she had been, quote, nasty to Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh during his Senate confirmation hearing. I thought it was terrible for her, Trump said. I thought it was terrible for our nation. I thought she was the meanest, most horrible, most disrespectful of anybody in the U.S. Senate, which I'm not surprised to think by that words. Donald Trump likes to use very big words in order to try to gain support and show that, well, or at least try to show people that he thinks he knows what he's doing. I think that was really put to the test with the recent interview from Fox News in which they basically gave him a presidential briefing and he did not know how to interpret the information. Continued from that section. But Trump has backed her before. Trump donated to Harris's campaign for the California Attorney General as recently as 2013, sending her $6,000 her way in 2011 and 2013. His daughter, Ivanka Trump, also donated $2,000 to Harris in 2014. Subtitle: Who is Kamala Harris? If the junior U.S. Senator from California is elected in November, she would achieve several firsts. The first woman vice president, the first African-American woman, and the first Indian-American to hold the second highest office. Born October 20th, 1964, in Oakland, California, to immigrant parents, Shamala Gopalan, a cancer researcher from India, and Donald Harris, an economist from Jamaica. Her parents were separated when she was 5, and I think what's interesting about her father is he was actually a Marxist from Jamaica. A little-known fact that's been circling around the leftist circles on Twitter. Education, she graduated with an undergraduate degree from Howard University and a law degree from the University of California, Hastings. Career, in 2003, Harris became the district attorney of the city and county of San Francisco. In 2010, she was elected the first African-American and first woman to serve as California's Attorney General. In 2016, Harris became the second black woman to be elected to the U.S. Senate. Family, her husband is an entertainment lawyer, Doug Emhoff, who likes to tweet supportive messages of her. She is stepmother to Ella and Cole Emhoff, known for, during the Democratic primary debate, she attacked Joe Biden for his stance decades ago on mandatory busing, describing a little girl who had benefited from it. A little girl, that was me, she quotes. She said, within hours, her campaign was selling shirts and emblazoned with the words in a childhood picture of Kamala Harris. Yet, I think this goes back to with the first statement that I just read there, back to just rainbow capitalism and the failure of reform under bourgeois democracy. Effectively, selling African American voters down a vote. Granted, sometimes their votes don't always count with gerrymandering, effectively taking away African American voters' rights in certain areas where Democrats have a lot of control, but also in certain white areas where Republicans have a lot of control and don't want to lose the support. They redraw the zones and basically take away people's voting rights. But regardless, Kamala Harris represents more or less identity politics and rainbow capitalism in the sense that we should have our oppressors should be both transgender, black, and whatever. Doesn't matter as long as it is progressive oppression. Also in the headlines is on the COVID-19 outbreak is a back to school article. Safety guidelines from Top Children's Hospital by Emily Bamforth. 3 doctors at major Ohio's children's hospitals have shared their recommendations on the latest updates on the coronavirus and children as part of Governor Mike DeWine's briefing on Tuesday, which Governor Mike DeWine was actually supposed to meet with President Trump not too long ago, maybe a few days to a week ago. And he actually contracted and tested positive for COVID-19. Before I go on, I'd like to say that I think the best thing that these doctors should just say is don't reopen the schools. It's a waste of time. Jason Unruh actually did a very good story on this for Mouse Rebel News, and stating how a school closed down only hours after it had reopened because a kid had tested positive for COVID-19 earlier and effectively, well, more or less infecting an entire school to COVID-19 and spreading it around. Now, to continue, although there's no such research on how COVID-19, a virus that doctors have battled for less than a year, might spread within school districts, there are basic guidelines on how districts and families might prepare to coming back for this year. Back to school is a contentious topic in Ohio, where school districts were handed the decision on whether or not to open in person this fall. The briefing builds on flexible guidance from the state on reopening and a mask mandate for students returning to school. There's little research on how the coronavirus might spread through schools because districts shut down at the first cases emerged in Ohio. Doctors are looking at reports from abroad and at similar situations like summer camps. All 3 doctors said that the pandemic has progressed. It has become clear that the children can contact and spread the coronavirus, but research is still in the early days. Moving forward with the school, well, this is a quote, moving forward in the school, there is a lot of uncertainty on how this is going to go. Dr. Patty Manning, Chief of Staff at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, said. In parentheses, and in quotations, health professionals, and parentheses, learned a lot about the first few days, weeks, and months, and our schools are going to have to do the same, and we need to support them. I think the best thing we can do to support our schools is apply the philosophical Occam's razor and use the most simple option to this problem, which is to not open up the schools and continue with Zoom meetings in classrooms. Granted, I fully understand the headaches that have come up with this. Students in their own private setting, sometimes exposing themselves, to say the least, and very compromising positions and whatnot. Just the general headaches that come about with a Skype call or any other video call. And also people getting into the calls, such like YouTubers and Twitch streamer 2Mad, who basically, well, I found hilarious, harassed Twitch streams, or I mean not Twitch streams, but Zoom meetings for classrooms. Essentially, I understand that there are issues there, but this is a life or death issue at the moment, and I think a headache is better than a migraine. Continuing, though children seem less likely to experience severe outcomes from the virus, Dr. John Bernard said, Chief of Pediatrics at Nationwide Children's Hospital, some said children need to be admitted to hospitals or intensive care units. The doctors have shared some guidelines and information that would guide parents, students, and districts to the nuances of reopening safely. Here's a look at the main takeaways from the briefing. Subtitle: 6 feet. 15 minutes. Whether a student or staff member might need to be isolated depends on what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention call close contact or being within 6 feet or more than 15 minutes. Dr. Adam Mezoff, Chief Medical Officer at Dayton Children's Hospital, said that school leaders can think through the choices after positive coronavirus testing using this measure. For example, if the student playing team sports without a mask tests positive, students who came into close contact with the student should be isolated. Well, the problem with that is masks are annoying, especially in a contact sport like football, or if you're playing dirty soccer, or, my favorite sport, hockey. Masks aren't going to do anything. You're in close contact. It's a contact sport. It's going to spread through those means. It's not practical. The entire American thinking that we're having right now, especially with the dismantling of the pandemic team, this entire situation is very impractical. Meanwhile, various other countries are returning to normal. China, Vietnam, which is only starting to have its upsurge in cases. The rest of Europe are having their upticks because people followed orders and did not act overly individualistic in their ways. Now we are in a perpetual state of lockdown because Americans feel that masks are some form of tyranny or some form of, I guess you could say, Great Britain repression from the colonial days. I eagerly await the next Boston Tea Party. I would like some free tea, please. Let's see, where was I? But students in the school who didn't breach that boundary may have been in the same room with the student, just need to monitor the symptoms, as do the friends and families of the teammates who are possibly exposed. Continued on section A5, C school. Continued school from section A1. Meshoff said if a person is once removed from the case, they do not need to isolate. It's not clear yet on how intermediate contact, if someone came in close contact repeatedly for less than 15 minutes each time, would affect these scenarios. Meshoff said that these situations should examine the intensity of contact. Well, the problem with this is that modern-day schooling is based off of the Prussian education system, which, side note, was meant to only instill obedience and the narrative of that country. Basically, it is a propaganda machine, which is why Karl Marx railed against it in his time, as he technically lived in Prussia or grew up in Prussia. But the thing is how this is set up. It's based on the old Prussian model, and the desks are in close proximity. Say a kid is too poor and they cannot afford a mask and they are wearing a broken mask and they cough and they are positive with coronavirus. Then other people in the classroom who might have a broken mask too, or no mask at all because they can't afford it, or are just plain refusing, they get it too. It should also be noted that while there is a mandatory mask thing, if schools do choose to reopen this fall, it should be noted that you cannot punish all these kids. Like I said before, kids are very rebellious, or they don't respect authority very well. The problem's going to arise when you have to punish all these kids and put them in a cramped detention room together. The virus will inevitably spread. Essentially, a public center like a school is just a infection center. This is why such sporting events such as the Major League Baseball League and the NHL, not the NHL, yes, the NHL, all have closed arenas, and they're not letting people in because they know that these places are infection centers. This should be obvious, and I am very disappointed that the doctors are not saying to just, close down the schools. Continuing, masks first, then distancing and washing hands. That's the subtitle. Manning laid out 4 measures to help stem the spread of coronavirus during the school day. Ranked in importance, they are: number 1, masks; number 2, distancing; number 3, hand hygiene; number 4, cleaning surfaces. Schools should also examine the ventilation and airflow to help mitigate risk. Manning said that when 6 feet of distancing isn't possible, which it's almost impossible if you have been to high school, which I hope most of you have received some form of education, public free education, uh, hallways are always cramped. People are on various different time schedules. They're going to different classes. They aren't always coordinated the same. Granted, the amount of coordination to actually work with this would be a absolute nightmare. Students having to be in the same classes all at once to go to the other same classes, if you get what I'm saying. Basically, just selected timetables that might work, but then again, I don't think that the school district really wants to go through those hoops. Asked whether crowded hallways, like the one pictured in a viral photo from the school in Georgia, were acceptable for school days, Manning said that the situation was not optimal. If students travel in the hallway for less than 15 minutes and are wearing masks, that makes the situation safer. Ohio recently enacted a mask mandate for students returning to school. I don't think that would be very effective. We all know how viruses spread. Granted, I'm not trying to be one of the anti-intellectual right, which says that the coronavirus is a 5G cancer or whatever that they're saying, some QAnon type coronavirus conspiracy. We all know how these spread. We have been instilled this at a very young age that if someone is sick, please stay away from them. Or that if you are sick, you do not go to school. And the problem with that last part is we don't know if we're always sick. It could just be a regular cold. And effectively, we are affecting each other because we're not following common sense. Subtitle: Cases differ in demographic. Health officials don't know how much the coronavirus spreads between children. Some students, though, are more likely to test positive for the virus, Bernard said. Older teenagers, around 17 years old, are more likely to test positive because these students can drive and have more active social lives than younger children. Bernard said Black or Hispanic students are 4 to 6 times more likely to test positive for coronavirus. Young children who need more contact and care are also more likely to expose to coronavirus, Manning said. And I think this really comes down to the poverty that many minorities face. Granted, I'm not saying that white Americans do not experience poverty. In the same instance, anyone who is marginalized in this case is getting the brunt force of the coronavirus. I have a friend who works in a group home for the developmentally disabled. It's a company that runs group homes and takes care of the developmentally disabled. And from what I understand is that these places are getting disproportionately hit. Not his company specifically, but it comes down to a statistic showing that not too long ago that the hardest hit people in this country are people with developmental disabilities. The little rundown on how these group homes work is the residents live there because they have been deemed unfit to take care of themselves in full. And people who are paid come in and take care of them, hang out with them, cook them dinner, and all that. But this also acts as a way to spread the virus, both from the person coming in, giving it to the person, and then from the people who are coming in, then going out and then spreading it from other people. And effectively, it should also be noted that people with developmental disabilities are also able to develop other issues, such as physical issues that are beyond their developmental handicap. So pre-existing conditions are present with them, which helps the fatality rate, I guess you could say, and helps kill off people with developmental disabilities quicker. Let's get back on track. Subtitle: Getting back on schedule. Hey! Part of children getting comfortable with returning to school is talking directly with them about the situation, Manning said. Let children know it's okay to be uncertain, she said. Manning also encourages beginning to return children to a daily routine, practicing what they would need to do returning in person to school. Children do better with structure and a schedule. Well, again, I repeat ad infinitum. Children are very, very rebellious. High schoolers and just like kindergartners, like to touch each other all the time. And I'm not necessarily talking in a sexual way, but they like to high five or roughhouse and horseplay. Manning also encourages Manning also encourages beginning to return children to. Oh, sorry, I already read that, folks. Subtitle: Possible data requirements. When asked about whether the state will monitor and release case number information related to the coronavirus, like in nursing homes, Governor DeWine said officials will look into it. I think generally, more information is better, he said. It allows parents to make decisions. DeWine says he hopes that schools will be able to share the data and that districts have an obligation to keep families up to date, including sharing these necessary information about cases. And again, this all comes down to we should not have these schools open. I mean, I can't be the only sane and rational person out there. Like I said earlier, Zoom meetings are a headache, and any video calling service is a headache, but I'm pretty sure it's better than a migraine. And also, there might be schools holding back on data just to look good and not cause a panic because of incompetent administration. Now, moving on to the next headline is George family donated $119K to campaigns by John Canigula. I hope I said that right, John. I am sorry if I am butchering your name. As Larry Householder ascended to power in the Ohio State House, he had a powerful ally from Cleveland who backed his work and contributed to his campaigns. Prominent Cleveland businessman Tony George and his family gave nearly $120,000 in contributions to Householder in the past 4 years. Just as Householder returned to state politics and rose to become Speaker of the Ohio House record show, George, 63 of Westlake, is involved in a number of businesses. He and his family are best known as the owners in bars and restaurants in greater Cleveland, including Harry Buffalo. But he has done more than run businesses. For years, he has sought the role of a political rainmaker in raising and contributing money to candidates of both parties. Therefore, bourgeois democracy in action. If you do not have money, you are not free. In Householder's case, George also supported First Energy Corp and its subsidiaries. The company and its affiliates are accused of paying $60 million in bribes to Householder and 4 allies in federal racketeering, an indictment that has left the state house reeling. This is very big news here in Ohio. Essentially, one of our main power plants, nuclear power plants, which is in Sandusky, which is near Toledo, Ohio, which is near the Michigan border, essentially, from my knowledge, is getting ready to be shut down. And let's see where this article continues. Donations, A9. Let's find A9, shall we, comrades? I think it's on the other one. Continued. Was Householder bunch First Energy out to ruin the Cleveland Public Power? Cleveland City Council intends to investigate whether or not any parties accused in the State House corruption scandal involving bailouts of Ohio's nuclear power plants also intended to, quote, destroy city-owned Cleveland Public Power. In particular, Council will examine First Energy Corp, listed but not charged as Company A in federal indictment papers, was involved in efforts against the city and its electric utility. City Council President Kevin Kelly said Monday, I believe it was an outside attempt to destroy Cleveland Public Power. We have an obligation to investigate. Kelly said during a meeting of the City Council's Finance Committee, if you peel this back, HB6 back, it really did have a harmful effect on the city. The council has the authority under the city charter of subpoena witness to compel production of documents and take testimony to investigate issues of the city interest. Although the council often has hearings, it has been years since it has subpoenaed witnesses. The Finance Committee admitted to a resolution that initially called for repeal of HB 6 to invoke the subpoena power. The resolution will be put forward before a full council today. And today, that is Wednesday, August 12, 2020. Quote, Council has reason to believe Company A has a long-term public policy goal specific to the city of Cleveland to restrict or destroy Cleveland public power and to influence or control the city's legislation body with its executive branch and resolution. And this is why we do not need bourgeois democracy. If this was socialism, in which the workers controlled the means of production, and there is an actual democracy by and for one class, not multiple classes, the landlord class and the bourgeois class and the paid bourgeois class, so on and so on. This would be a fairly settled interest. Instead, petty politics of the bourgeoisie have interfered with this and is putting people at risk, putting clean energy at risk, but also putting public utilities at risk. Where was I? Cleveland Public Power has about 70,000 residents, commercial and industrial customers in the city. Among it is First Energy Stadium, the home of the Cleveland Browns. First Energy has about 60,000 customers in Cleveland, which, if you to be honest, I think they're wasting their money on First Energy Stadium. Is the Cleveland Browns, of course. Although Kelly didn't have a specific timeline for action, he intends to start quickly. HB 6, approved a year ago by the General Assembly and signed by Governor Mike DeWine, approves more than $1 billion in ratepayer subsidies for Ohio's Davis, Bessie, and Perry nuclear power plants owned and operated by Energy Harbor, formerly First Energy Solutions, a subsidiary of First Energy Corporation, until it broke away last year. Money for those subsidiaries will be collected monthly from ratepayers from 2021 until 2027, so a 6-year span, ranging from 85 cents for residential customers to 2,400 for large industrial plants. The law also provides subsidies for coal plants in Ohio and Indiana. It effectively guts the state's green energy mandates for utilities. Great. The changes also hurt Cleveland. The city had set goals to reduce its emissions by 20% by 2020 and 25% by 2025. As a part of that effort, CCP had collected more than 600,000 renewable energy cuts that could be applied against energy efficiency requirements. HB 6 essentially made those credits worthless, said Jason Wood, who's chief city of Jackson's official office of sustainability. Among those factors, Kelly wants to investigate who bankrolled groups working against Cleveland Public Power, even through lobbying against members of City Council directly, or was done by an organization called Consumers Against Deceptive Fees, or working to change Cleveland's charters and shrinking the size of the council. An effort that fizzled last year by a group that called itself Cleveland First. Cleveland First was bankrolled in part by Westlake businessman Tony George, who has links to First Energy. In 2017, George was an agent of TPI Efficiency, one of 4 companies that sought to provide electric aggregation service to about 600,000 homeowners and businesses in the city who are not members of CPP. TPI intended to use a First Energy affiliate as a supplier of electricity, according to city records. And again, a thing that the working class has no control over, which they should. This should be their matter, not the matter of the bourgeois class and their contradictory interests. We should have full control over where our energy is coming from, how it's being made, if it's clean or not, which, in my opinion, it should. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I just only wanted to do, that's all this is going to be, is the important stories that are in newspapers. This is going to be in a irregular podcast when I have time. I do work a lot. And as always, comrades, red salute.